Okay, it's 1:30, so we should be starting. So those near to the doors, could they please close the doors? Yeah, this is the call working group. I'm Carsten Bormann. This is Rainer Jimenez, and I'm not saying this right. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, there is a mailing list, and there is a Jabber room, and this thing doesn't work. It does work. It's a secretariat provided pointer, so you have to be really close to the computer to use it. This is an IETF meeting. This is a Monday, so just for everybody to refresh their minds, we assume that everybody has read the drafts, and we are here to advance difficult issues. And all this is based on the IPR principles defined in RC 8179, and there is a nice slide that you can reach with pointers to the information. So IETF all about the world of HTML tells you what we are governed by here. So let's talk about the agenda today. Today we will focus on documents that already have passed.
I don't think you're on the mic.
Blah, 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 blah. Today we will focus on drafts that already have passed working group last call and are in various stages of going through the ISG, and two sets of drafts that we really want to working group last call after this meeting. So this is links.json, OSCORS, NML, resource directory, and the COMA set. And tomorrow we will have Coco because there will be a transport area person coming in. That's why this is tomorrow. We will move their URL up. I haven't managed to put this into the slides yet. And then we will go through documents that are a little bit less advanced. And you can see there's a lot of documents, and so this will be a little bit of a gong show tomorrow. Do we have any changes, additions to the agenda that we need to do? Okay, so let me quickly talk about the working group status. We have one RFC published since the last IETF, which is the CoAP over TCP/TLS. That was a pretty long last mile we had with this draft, but we finally got it published on February 15th, and one of the things that we actually had to do is write another RFC that was just patching a minor hole in the WebSockets environment.
This is actually would it help to like buy a round of beer for everyone each time this working group gets an RFC done?
Yes.
It might be a lot of beers this year, so
That's all right. That's all right if that motivates you.
Minute takers, please take a note. Okay, so this I'm not going through the milestones right now because it's too many documents to actually talk about all of them. So we will talk about the documents when we talk about the documents. But I have a couple of advertisements I have to get rid of at the beginning. First of all, there will be a thing-to-thing research group meeting on coexistence this afternoon. Those of you who were at the Hot RFC talks have heard Laura talk about the problem she's trying to address. So right now we are building cars under the assumption there are no other cars on the highway. And that works for a while, but at some point we will have to put in direction indicators and all the other things that allows cars to work in traffic. And so coexistence is mostly seen as a PHY-MAC layer thing, but that's probably not true. We have to think about coexistence. How does our pet network work in an apartment building together with 200 other networks? That's a problem that we currently don't quite know how to solve. So it's research. but I think it might be interesting to this group as well. Second thing, there is a draft that is going to be working group last called very, very soon in the 6-ish working group. And that draft contains a co-op option. And that's, I think, the way it should be. Co-op is designed for extensibility, so other groups should be able to define options. It's an option that we have talked about here, the stateless proxy option. And I would advise everyone who cares about things like this to look at the draft and maybe send a message to core and or 6-ish about any comments that you have, and maybe go to the meeting on Wednesday in the Viscount room. So just to give away what I'm going to write, I think we had a discussion on whether that option could be repeatable or not. And right now it's defined as not repeatable. And we probably should think about whether that's the right thing to do or not. The third thing is we are going to talk about resource directory today. And we are mapping resource directory to DNSSD. So we're going to briefly talk about that, but actually there will be more discussion about that in the DNSSD meeting on Thursday morning. So please go there if you care about resource directory and or DNSSD. Okay, and one message from our sponsors. This is really not directly related to core, but it's interesting to everybody who cares about constrained systems. So the next Riot Summit will be in September in Amsterdam, and you might care about that. Okay, that finishes the first 10 minutes on the agenda. And the next thing is links JSON. So this draft, we have been discussing this draft for a while. Actually, it was started in February 2012. So by the time when 6690, what is now 6690, became stable, we thought, well, it might be a good idea to have a JSON version of that as well, to avoid having the need for another parser. In mid-2015, we added CBOR variants for that. So the whole point is about documents that contain links, and it is used for self-description of core nodes. It's in /well-known/core. And for a long time, we have been working on this document with the assumption that the focus should be on round tripability with RFC 6690. And that's actually that's been the focus of the draft that passed working group last call last year and was submitted to the ISG on April 2nd. And then that opened the floodgates and we got lots of feedback. And there's also related work, for instance, in the OCF spec that we probably shouldn't ignore. So they are not using exactly the same format, but it's kind of culturally compatible, and we should try to understand what they were trying to do. So with all that feedback and all that related work, it didn't seem reasonable to continue with the direction that the work had taken so far, focus on round tripability. And so the proposal is to refocus this a little bit and try not to inherit the limitations that we put in RFC 6690 for it to be easy to implement. So the idea is to have a full web linking environment in the JSON or CBOR variants, but of course still cover all of RFC 6690 because we at least want to make sure that the forward direction works, even if the backward direction may not always be possible because of the limitations there. So that is the refocus. If you look at the document, there's actually not much change. I have submitted a version that does most of the changes already. So it's still pretty much the same document, but there are some details that are now refocused on this. And there is one background activity that happened while we were last calling the links.json document. An update of RFC 5988, which is the base document of RFC 6690, happened. So the web linking people revised their specification. So RFC 6690 is now based on what is an obsolete version of the web linking specification. That's probably not a big problem because they were careful of not trying to break too many things. But again, what happened here is they have refocused it a little bit. So, for instance, the way ABNF was used in 5988, which creates some of the little problems we're having here, that was fixed in 8288. There is now a clearer approach to the Unicode and language tags issue, and most importantly, the document actually acknowledges that there will be other serializations of web linking, not just the one in the HTTP link header, which this was originally about, but for instance, RFC 6690, links.json, and other things that may be coming. We haven't seen a need to actually update 6690 to that new version. We think it pretty much works well as it is. So right now, the idea is to rebase links.json on 8288, but at the same time stay mostly compatible to 6690, which is based on 5988. So there is a few places where this comes up, and I have just put in one here in the slides, language tags. RFC 5988 defines some special target attributes that have a star, an asterisk, in their name. And what's special about them is not actually the attribute itself, but the way they are represented in an HTTP link header, because HTTP link headers may need to be ASCII. If you have a link attribute that actually uses Unicode, you have to do something. And what they decided to do is provide an encoding of the Unicode content and also provide a language tag, which is typically useful to actually correctly interpret the Unicode. So you know whether some Chinese characters are in reality Japanese characters and things like that. So 6690 has some support in its ABNF for a title star attribute, but that uses exactly the weird HTTP link header syntax. And originally we just copied that over into links.json, and that just doesn't make sense. We should, of course, decode this stuff and put it in actual Unicode. And the new thing is, it became clear in the discussion that we probably also need to preserve the language tag. So what the real new piece of technical content here is that a title star attribute in a link header or in 6690 would be translated into a normal title attribute, but the value of this attribute would be a string qualified by a language tag. So if you want to have the German word Übergrößenträger in a title, then you put in Unicode string and put in a language tag that helps to decode it. Okay, so this is new stuff, and we all have to look at it and agree that this is the right way to do it. So that's a detail, but on a high level, is this the right way forward? Rebasing the document on RFC 8288, cleaning up title star, and a few other places where 8288 has cleaned up things. Explain how RFC 6690 documents become linked JSON documents, so make sure the mapping is fully defined in that direction. But otherwise, keep links JSON generally applicable and free of RFC 6690 idiosyncrasies. That's one thing. That's the direction for this document. And another direction that we as a working group should be deciding at some point, is there any intention of getting rid of the old link format? Do we actually want to replace well-known core by a JSON form or a CBOR form? That's a second thing, which does not have a bearing on what we do in the document, but that's something that we as a working group
Sort of does, because this was raised in IHG review, why you have multiple formats and which one can use this, which one is so it sort of makes
Yes, but the comment was that this also was an ISG question. But the document is very clear about this replacement not happening at this point. So I think, but we have to think about, for instance, the CBOR representation is pretty compact. Is that something we want to have in a constraint? No. That.
So Zach Shelby, the first 3 bullet points, I think this is completely logical as a way forward, so I don't have any pushback there. I'm not intimately familiar with the ISG comments around those, if this fulfills those requirements. So it sounds like, from Carson's point of view, it does. The last one, I would comment that we have media type variations with different serializations for a reason. I don't see any reason why these can't coexist, but this just needs to be made clear, right? Like if I request a CBOR version of .well-known/core, I should get that rather than an implementation just blowing up because, oh, you should get RFC 6690. Why are you asking for CBOR? Right. So I think we need to be able to be future proof also with how we deal with /.well-known/core. So this 4th bullet point, should we mandate that it's just 6690? No, we should mandate that you can optionally support others, but you probably have to continue to support this as the default.
Yeah, so the question was not so much about forbidding its use in well-known core or something like that, but what is the mandatory to implement part?
I don't think we, well, there's a difference between mandatory to implement and recommended, right? I mean, you need something that everyone has to support. Right now, the way flash sizes in embedded devices are increasing at that rate, CBOR is not an issue, right? We have more issues with overhead on the wire, energy, et cetera. So I don't see CBOR as a limitation in these devices, but we do have enough stuff out there that's using 6690. It's in the wild. It would be hard for us to just say, now the mandatory CBOR, and does the device just, fail if it doesn't understand CBOR? I don't think that's reasonable.
Michael Koster, Smart Things. In RD, I think the approach we took, and Christian can correct me if that's been changed, was that we required RFC 6690 compatibility and allowed additional media types. And if that's what's being proposed here, I think that makes sense for well-known core also.
Okay, the trick, of course, is if you don't care about the old link format, is that you just provide a very short link format document that points to a linked CBOR document that has the actual information. So then you are compliant to the letter, but realize the difference. Okay. Yeah, one link to the. Okay, so you can kind of gradually migrate away without creating a big problem. Okay. I take it that we want to continue this way. So there is a -11 out there right now. There are a few final tweaks that I probably want to make. And I would say the process.
Yeah, this document is like 9 months after ISG review, so I probably should return it to the working group. It's it also depends how many other changes you think you want to do and for how long. So
Yeah, so if everything works like I think it should, there should be a version of this by the end of the month.
Okay.
That has all the changes. And then, of course, the working group should look at this in some form. Is this the working group last call? I don't know.
right, I might be able to short circuit avoid another IETF last call, but this document will need another ISG review at minimum because several area directors who balloted on it are just going to step down from ISG. So you will lose some votes. It might not have enough positions to pass.
There were also 3 discusses which are kind of linked to these issues. And,
Yes.
Yeah, so let's take that part of the discussion offline. But the idea is to finish this quickly and do the process that is appropriate. Okay. If there are no other comments on this, the next item is OSCOR.
Hello, everyone. I'm Göran Selander from Ericsson. I'm going to present the next update on OSCOR. So we are now in version 11. And on behalf of my co-authors, I'd like to go through the issues from the IC review. Here is just the status, number of implementations. We actually appeared 1 new implementation at the end of the list there, which so it's really being used. Several interrupts have been done. But the topic of today's presentation is about the ISG review. We also have some post-last call reviews. And if you want to follow the details, we are handling the review comments on the wiki. And we have in this new version 11, we think that all but a few specific comments are addressed. So there are a few slides on review comments. I'm not going through all, but those that I think are sort of representative for the type of comments we've got. Here is a comment saying the document needs a security analysis section, and implications and modifications of unprotected fields are not sufficiently covered. So there was already a security consideration, but the ISD wanted to have more specifically an analysis of the security that is being used in this protocol and what guarantees are provided. So what we propose to do is to add, and what we already have done, is to add an appendix describing security properties of the protocol. And there are 3 subsections. One is looking at the problem statement, the assumptions on intermediaries. So that was not really clear to everyone making the review, so we think that needs to be highlighted. That the intermediary are supposed to perform certain actions using the available headers, but other message fields are not available to the intermediaries. So there are protected headers and there are unprotected headers. And then we will also include 2 subsections, one which is going through the security properties of the protected headers, and one which is going through the unprotected fields and the consequences of being unprotected. There were questions around the nonce construction. Why is sender ID included in the nonce? And the rationale is that the security design is intended to support both the ordinary request response, notifications, as well as an interchange of client and server roles. And that requires special construction. So what we think is needed for understanding this better is that we have a proof for how key nonce uniqueness is obtained. And we put that as a 4th subsection in the new appendix. But this design actively works against any involvement of intermediaries. That also the type of comment which basically shows that we have not done a good job explaining the problem statement, what the intermediaries are supposed to do. So, that's the first of the 3 subsections of the appendix, which we're dealing with the intermediaries and their role. And we'll elaborate more on that.
So can I a quick comment on that? I think it would be useful to start a document that just explains different situations in which OSCOR is being used, so people understand why that is actually not true. I mean, it should not go into this document because we want to finish it. But having a short document that even might go over to LWIC, I don't know, that just says these are different configurations in which we run OSCOR, and these are the rationales for why we want to support these configurations. I think that would be useful, and it could even be done on top of 7744, which already has use cases, so you don't really have to define these use cases in most cases.
I mean, part of this is actually in the requirements document, the co-op end-to-end requirements. There are also examples showing how this is used, along with the trust model for the proxies. So I don't know if there's something that needs to be added.
So should we maybe complete this requirements document, please not with the name requirements, but as an informational document that goes with OSCOR, or that succeeds this, because we want to finish OSCOR first, but
Yes.
would it be useful to turn this into an RFC?
I think so. The working group is happy with that. I think that's
So the ISG is always pushing back a little bit on informational documents, but I think in this case, because of this kind of question, it might actually be a useful thing to do. So we just need to find people who want to work on this. Who would want to work on this?
Well, I mean, there are authors of the document. I suppose they are. It's Francesca, Klaus, and me that are the authors. Of
Okay.
The document. Others are welcome.
So who else, maybe? Anybody else who would be interested in finishing that? Well, you will be reviewing it, certainly, but yeah. Okay, let's take that offline and see if there's a way to complete this document.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And then there was a set of high-level comments related to, I mean, in this case, is a statement about this draft is neglecting to address important and difficult parts of the problem, like key exchange. And we disagree with this comment. We are addressing, I mean, basically the host comment was saying this is a partial solution because there is no key exchange protocol, but there are other ways to establish keys besides key exchange. And so you could either do it with the OSCOR profile of the ACE framework, or some IT deployments require PSK, so because of their constrained nature. So it is a complete solution, but on the other hand, the key exchange protocol is also something that's needed for OSCOR, and that was discussed in the ACE working group this morning. So we agree with the need for a key exchange, but it's not a necessary condition for OSCOR. And then there were a bunch of comments on HTTP, and they were very good because we hadn't focused so much on HTTP. So first comment, this protocol abuses HTTP by tunneling over it. And that is actually correct. And that was exactly what was intended. We had a missing ABNF, and that's fixed now, we hope. There was a question about how does the co-op HTTP gateway understand the significance of the new header field? So that's the object security header field, and insert the media type when translating. And that's exactly what we wanted to intend. So we don't want to necessarily add a content format for an object security protected message.
So,
But
Carsten from the floor, I'm not sure we are actually abusing HTTP. Yes, we are tunneling through it, but we are using it as a request response protocol. It's not like we are just using HTTP to send messages back and forth. So I think there are different levels of abuse, and I think we are not in the murder range here. We are just in the manslaughter range.
thanks for the clarification. So, and then there was a question was, do we need a code point for co-op for this new media type? And we had this question before. And we said, as we said that time, previously we said, no, we actually don't need it for this draft. And then we realized that maybe someone will actually have a use for this code point. So we decided to include that anyway, but not use it in the draft and explain when you're not going to use it. So that's a placeholder currently in the draft. What if the request is redirected by the server that doesn't understand OSCORE? Okay, so here are these two questions are actually still things which we would like to have good feedback from the working group. Shall we support HTTP redirects? And the setting is, so there are two settings. One setting, this is one of the settings, HTTP redirects. You have a co-op through an HTTP proxy, co-op HTTP proxy, and you come to a server, and the server makes a redirect back to the proxy. That would be the HTTP redirect. Is that okay? Let's start with that, please.
Why is that a thing that should be addressed in OSCORE? This is a thing that affects co-op HTTP proxies in general, and I think in general they don't. But this is generic.
Good question. I think the reason why, I mean, this is one of the questions we got from the IST review. So we assumed that this was reasonable to address in the document. But the answer could be that it's not something that we are actually addressing. There is also, by the way, when you define a new HTTP header, you need to answer a number of questions. How will this be impacted by redirect? So I think from that point of view, we should have a good answer to the question. So, and this question was brought up again by Dave Taylor. Do you want to say something, Jim?
On the first point, I don't think that this is a media type of co-op. It may be a media type of OSCORE, but my assumption is is that co-op outer got stripped.
So this is just a question of the content format, a value, basically.
Right. But there's no co-op headers on this.
No. I mean, it's just the value for the so we have a media type for the object security, for the payload containing the compressed COSI object. We have a media type for that, and the question is, do we also need a content format, a value? And we don't need it for this draft, but maybe someone wants to use this compressed COSI object and pass along a media type for it. Okay, I don't have a better answer than that. People have been requesting this, and we thought it better include it now than find a good use case later and then have to do it.
Yeah, so maybe to answer this question, there is no need to include the content format option because the object security option already implies the value of the content format option. However, if this media type is used in some composite media type that has content format numbers on the specific elements that go into the composite media type, then it is useful to have a number for that. That's all. That's the whole reason.
Makes sense, Jim? So sort of. Okay. So while thinking about that, so yeah, so the question actually was then brought up again by Dave Taylor. So he said, has the working group made a conscious decision here whether we're going to support HTTP redirects or not? He was not. He didn't really care about the answer, but he just wanted the working group to take the decision that either no, we are not supporting HTTP redirects, or yes, we will support them, and we will make sure that the necessary whatever specification is in place, if there is anything.
Alexei, I will try to provide not very formed and not necessarily correct opinion on this. I was talking to Patrick McManus, one of HTTP-based co-chairs, about another document that decided to prohibit redirects. And he said basically, you shouldn't be doing this when you're using HTTP. The redirect is a standard feature. You should just support it, basically. I'm not entirely sure whether there are any exceptions to this, but that's the gist of the comment I got from him. Besides, I don't think that actually, I need to think a bit more about this, but I think you can have HTTP proxies on the path that don't have to understand OS core. As long as they implement HTTP correctly, they will work with what, it's just another payload for them. So they can redirect to another resource and it can go to another server that is HTTP to core proxy, and then everything should be fine. So my gut feeling, I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with using redirects.
Francesca, so the problem we're thinking of is that if it doesn't reach the right server, the server won't, like the security material won't be there. If it reaches a different server, it's not a proxy problem. It's who is this intended to, and do they have the right security material?
I mean, if it goes to the wrong place, I don't really see a huge problem because it will basically just return an HTTP error, and you're fine. I mean, and if it goes to somebody who understands the format but doesn't have the right key, you're going to end up with much the same situation.
Right. +1.
Okay, so we will make sure that this supports HTTP redirects in some way, and if we need to specify something, we'll find out what to put here. The last point on this slide is the name of the HTTP header field. So originally we call it object security, and we got some comments that we should probably be more specific, that it's not, it's actually dealing with the constrained and RESTful setting. So the proposal was to change to co-op object security, which is the current text in the draft. And now we got another proposal from Dave Taylor. He thinks we should call it core object security because it's, he actually didn't want to narrow this down to co-op. He thinks this is in his view of the end-to-end REST setting. So there's a counter proposal here to change the name to core object security. Any views?
Well, the whole reason you changed the name to OSCore was because it wasn't co-op specific anymore. So putting co-op in there doesn't make any sense at all.
It was Dave who proposed the change from OSCORP to OSCORP. So this is a consequential change. Okay.
So why not just call it OSCORE? So that's a Googleable term, which is probably more useful than anything else we can come up with.
Yeah, we had that discussion a number of times. I think that most arguments against that is gone. Could you recall the arguments? That's a while ago. So would that be changing both the option and the header field, or what would be? We have a co-op option, and we have an HTTP header field.
But the option name never occurs on the wire, so you don't get in a situation where you need to Google it. But the HTTP header name, that occurs on the wire. And if you find a strange packet with that in it, you might want to Google it. So I think that the Googleability of the header field name is an important thing. How we actually call the co-op option, we have very wide.
Okay, so any other views? Naming things we can discuss forever, as you know. So really, really important stuff. So I put out the mail on the mailing list and asked, this is the proposal, and I respond to Dave's mail basically. Okay. Any other views? Then we move on to, that was the last actually. So this is not a complete coverage of all the review comments. You could look at the wiki and the commits that we have on the GitHub essentially. But in summary, we have tried to clarify the points which were brought up and fix all the editorials. And there is a new appendix for reviewing, which has these 4 subsections as we discussed. And yeah, that's essentially the status with version 11.
Next steps?
Yeah.
Are all issues addressed?
Are all issues, essentially all issues are addressed. So are all issues addressed? There were some minor to do. I would say that, let's say yes on that answer. All issues are addressed.
So will there be a -12 or?
No, I mean, so okay, so let me, no, I won't go through the detailed issue. What is the to-do? Where is it to in the draft? In the version 11. This was late night work, so I can't reproduce it. So I would say that we should be able to fix whatever is in the to-do during today or tomorrow. That type of complete.
Francesca, so if you take a look at the wiki in the GitHub, we're really tracking all the issues and what we have done and what we consider we just have to answer and what we need to just review. In general, I think all the elements are in the draft. We might want to rephrase some things, but the content is there, in our opinion. And yes, so we just need to answer the emails we got.
Exactly. That's the next step, basically. Respond to the emails pointing to the new text and asking if they are happy with resolution.
Okay, so the assumption would be there will be a -12 in a couple of days from now.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, there is a to-do, so we need to have.
Yeah.
But we could respond to the emails sooner because
Yes.
we basically have. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Ari.
Okay, I'm gonna give a quick status update on Cinnamel. Better now?
Eat it.
No,
Works now? No?
sounds like it's on.
1.5 millimeters from your mouth.
Oh, okay, this is gonna be interesting.
No.
No? No?
There, yeah.
Okay.
Closer.
Closer?
Yes.
It's gonna be a slightly awkward, but anyway. So, update for media types for Cinnamel. And
That's also a nice key you can press.
okay, status. First of all, we're done from working group point of view. So Cinnamel is currently in IETF last call. Telechat is scheduled 1 month from now. So there was since last version, Alexa did a thorough review on it, and so a bunch of editorial clarifications, etc., that we fixed there. One that you could consider a technical change was that the media type registration for EXI was changed from +EXI to -EXI. Although yesterday we did discover this may be worth clarifying one small point there on the expert guidance on new values to make it clear when new values are registered in the name, long name of the value, the human readable part, it should say value to make it clear this has the value semantics for the new field. Then for early assignments, so there's currently the version that is submitted has just some bunch of TBDs on the IDs because those are going to be assigned by IANA. But since there's already a lot of use for Cinnamel, it would be useful to have those IDs assigned as soon as possible. So what we've been discussing now with the reviewers, expert reviewers for the registry is that, okay, it is a good set of IDs, have a one consequent set of IDs for all the numbers except for XML. So the reason for those XML IDs being in the 2-byte range is that XML is anyway quite verbose, so you're not saving much for using the 1-byte IDs. So there's a lengthy thread with the experts on this, and now we all seem to be having consensus on this. So we'll be going forward with these assignments unless someone sees any concerns.
So procedurally, this is an early allocation. So the authors of this document will ask the chairs and the AD to do early allocation, and then we. I mean, if you approve it tomorrow, we don't have to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I might not have added it to the next telechat, but it's probably going to be an ISG review in April.
Yes.
It is on the 19th.
Okay, so I mean, do you really need early allocation on 5th, April 5th? 2 weeks earlier than that?
Do you think we're gonna have the assignments at telechat, or?
Well, basically, fingers crossed. If it's approved on a telechat, then it goes into publication, and IANA does allocation very shortly as soon as it's submitted to RFC editor.
Okay, so if you promise not to do any discusses, I think it's fine.
I cannot promise things outside of my control. You already got yes from me, so that's fine.
Okay, so I guess we can see if there's no discusses flowing in before the telechat, then we probably don't need to do it. Then it's only a couple of weeks. I'm thinking if there's something we need to do rounds of updates, having these IDs usable for other SDOs would be highly useful.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what happens during the telechat week, and then remind me if it's not done. We'll discuss. All right. Then yeah, the way to do it is I add management item to the telechat and say, can we approve this? And
okay, thanks. And then there's another question on early assignments. How about extensions to SendML? So since it's not an RFC yet, we don't have the registry actually, but there's already a request to add a new field from, again, external SDO from OMADM on the object links. So what is the general procedure here? Can we already allocate, but it's not part of this spec because the specification is external. So is there a procedure for this kind of assignments?
yeah, I don't think there is a procedure for early creation of a registry in a document that wasn't yet approved. I mean, the assignment can be done very quickly as soon as the document is approved, even if it's not published yet. I think that will be okay to actually basically say, well, IANA will create it right away. In fact, they usually typically create, draft versions of the registries, or at least they suggest, tell you what the registry is going to contain during last call. So they will have information available before the telechat typically.
Okay, I think that should be fast enough. That's about a month.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So much about SendML. So next, fetch and patch media types for SendML. So the background for this one is that you've been seeing a lot of SendML earlier, but there's one particular use of SendML called the collection use, and that is what is used today by Lightweight M2M protocol and also IPSO smart objects. So here's an example of an IPSO smart object. It's a remote actuator. It has it's actually actuator for light. It has a resource telling if the light is on and off, what is the current dimming value, how long it has been on, and human readable description of it. So use case here is that, what about if you want to retrieve or change only 2 of these resources? You could be, as of today, doing 2 gets on a specific resources and get the values, and that could be okay. However, if you want to do this in order to save bandwidth only with a single request, or maybe you want to be changing the value of 2 of those, but not touching the other 2. Luckily, we do have methods for that in COA. We have the COA fetch and patch that are exactly for addressing parts of a resource, updating or fetching them. However, the COA patch and fetch methods, they do need a payload format that is dependent on the resource representation format. and currently there is no one for ZenML. So that's exactly what is proposed by this draft. The fetch format looks like as in the example on the bottom of the slide. It is modeled after ZenML JSON format. Actually, this is plain ZenML without the values. And the idea there is that you can have simple parsing of these payload format because you already have support of ZenML on the device if it's using this format. And a really simple format, you just indicate the names and potentially times if you're using times in the other ZenML use of the records you want to fetch, and you will be getting the results for those. So this would be solving the problem of getting 2 resources out of the ZenML pack and 2 ZenML records in ZenML words. And then the batch format, exactly the same. However, you also give the values you want to be changing there. So those of you who are familiar with the JSON merge batch format is essentially a subset of that format applied for each record. So that's the simple part of the batch format. But then there's the optimization that is now currently called wildcards. And essentially, it's about when you want to be selecting multiple records using a single fetch or patch record. Again, it's if you have, let's say, a few hundred different records and you don't want to be naming explicitly 100 different records on your fetch or patch request, you could be using some kind of a way to select multiple records. A use case could be, for example, get all temperature sensor values or dim all lights to 10%. So currently, the draft is proposing one format, essentially a new ZenML field called fetch filter. You can use it like a name in ZenML. You're concatenated with the base name, and it can contain wildcard characters that you are then matching many characters up to a separator. And you can see there in the bottom slide example that would be matching all resources starting with 5.8. More common use would be, for example, to put the wildcard, for example, in the place of the 0 on the fetch filter. This would give you all instances of an object. So then the considerations regarding this draft. On the wildcards, just the upper half of the screen, okay, something simple is needed for addressing this use case. And there was quite a lot back and forth. What is the right way of doing that? The current is just, let's say, early proposal up for discussion. We believe the basic format that where you explicitly name the resources is kind of straightforward, but this wildcard is something a bit more complex and maybe needs quite a bit more thinking. And all in all, what we were discussing right before the core session here is that there is need for the fetch batch format relatively early, pretty much end of this year. However, this wildcard format is maybe something we want to consider a bit longer than trying to aim for end of this year. So it could be split out of this document because it is quite a bit of complexity and getting it right maybe requires some time. But the basic format seems to be pretty straightforward and something what we could be defining by the end of the year.
Zach Shelby, telepathic connection. So as soon as I stood up, you realized what I was going to say, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, we always have to be a little suspicious about need. And it sounds to me like this wildcard thing's nice to have. Now, if you look at how some of these resource structures were designed, like in OMA objects, right? Just referencing into like halfway down the tree will get you the entire object in there. So having like a 5/8 star kind of, okay, you get part of the object, but why? They're pretty granular already, right?
Yeah, but the 5/8 wasn't really a good example, actually. I think much more usable would be all instances of an object.
But you get that if you just reference the root of that object.
All instances of an object, but a specific resource.
Give good recommendation on proper object design. So that might be something you could do and say, like, we do not have wildcards in this version of this specification. Thus, here's some recommendations on how you can structure your resources in such a way that this is useful already now, right? That might be a temporary solution.
Makes sense. And all in all, this being able to select multiple things. Maybe it's what we need, want to have a bit more thinking, think about the use case properly, and probably it applies beyond ZenML. So ZenML is now where we hit it the first time, maybe something, even including RG scope, want to think about in a bigger picture, and then do later on, for example, an extension of this. But having the basic semantics for fetch and patch defined seems pretty straightforward. So if we then forget about the wildcard considerations for a while, and yeah, there's also a question about regular expressions, maybe later, preferably not. And on the patch operations, so currently the semantics is that you can basically create new and you can change existing ones, but you cannot, for example, append a similar. So there could be some need for operation codes later. But again, maybe it's something we want to do as an extension and really see if there's a use case for it. And also, currently the draft proposes new content format IDs, but as Klaus pointed out, there's no need for it. We can actually use the same existing content format IDs and just define the semantics with the patch and fetch that are slightly different from the regular ZenML use. But then the key question, since this is now a 0.0 draft, is there interest in the group to work on it? Because there's definitely interest external IETF, so OMADM has already requirements for something like this. And to me and a bunch of others here, it seems very sensible thing to do here, a generic thing that is used by OMADM instead of OMADM specifying a version that works for them. But then that comes with the kind of timeline stable by the end of the year, preferably RFC. But if we take the wildcard parts away, it sounds feasible.
Just as a comment, the operations are also taken out?
Yes. Unless
regex and all the...
Yeah, regex definitely.
Matthias Kovac, Siemens. So for these wildcards, there could be a use case on industrial systems. You very often have this write multiple, read multiple, and so on. So I would have interest to work on what is there that we need. I'm not specifically interested in the ZenML version, but in this generic thing, how we could solve this multiple read-write.
Sounds good. Let's look into it. So for the interest part, we not going to close now.
Hi, Padu from Nokia. My question is, like, with all these new additions, do we have any impression on the size growth of the code for a constrained device? I mean, is that something still?
For the supporting fetch and patch.
Yeah, for supporting all these new features and.
For wildcards, we don't have a good idea yet. Supporting the simple, here's the name. If you already support getting ZenML as input, the code changes would be pretty minimal because you already have all the machinery to understand that. And it's a matter of picking everything that does an explicit match. So I think that should be pretty straightforward. On the wildcard of filters and selectors, it really depends on the design. And one question, for example, the wildcard was, okay, how about more than one wildcard? Well, that actually increased the complexity quite a bit, but you get the benefit. So again, maybe that's something we want to push later. But it's not that, I don't think it's an urgent thing even for OMADM to have it. Yes.
This is Dave Brown speaking about wildcards. One of the things that I was going to say is that wildcards in the middle of the URI are the evil part, and you said, "Oh, that's exactly what I want." So, but to echo what Zach was saying, very often with proper structuring of the data, you can avoid that. If you think ahead to what your use cases are, you can avoid it. And possibly, if your structure is something that you're set with, that's built in stone, but you really want to query it a different way, there's nothing wrong with having data appear in different parts, different trees, different views. And so restructure the data over there in a different view, which allows you to be properly hierarchical, that at the very least, put your wildcards only at the end. Because wildcards in the middle, we know the search, writing the code for that is very difficult, especially if you have then you open up multiple wildcards and you go, so at different levels. It gets very complicated. Wildcards on the end are okay. And if you structure your data so that works, that's okay.
Yeah. And I think the wildcards in the center can be okay if you match it only up to a delimiter. So if you have clearly delimited structure. However, there is complexity definitely there. I fully agree
Right,
with that.
right. No,
So
yeah.
in case of, for example, like with the management object into smart object, you would know, okay, this object ID can be anything. So there are some structures where it works, but I do agree in general it is tricky.
Right.
And then coming back to your other, like, do another view, that's exactly what Christian was suggesting earlier.
Yes.
That we could be able to do different.
That often
views.
gets you away from having to do complex filtering or complex queries where you just, I have the query for you already because I know you want this and here's the view that does what you want.
So yeah, I think that's something we could be exploring in the wider scope of how we want to handle this.
Alexander Pelov, yes, I'm going to echo this comment and just add a point here that in Kamai we're using fetch for this type of operation. So whenever you want to do like a basically what we get as an input is that tree selection, like a subtree. If you want to go and like do some operation, subtree is pretty much everybody is asking for. So maybe, you know, just if you happen to want a couple of subtrees, then in a fetch operation, you can get them all of the things that you're wanting. I do see the use case where you might want to say, okay, I don't know exactly all the identifiers that are here. And, you know, I don't want to really restructure if some SDO has fixed some particular, you know, structure of URIs, then, you know, I don't want to redo this. But then, I mean, I feel that there must be some use case that comes and I say, okay, well, for this use case, we need the wildcard operation, and then to be narrowed down to this use case, and that could be useful.
Good, thanks.
So, who would be interested in reviewing future versions of this document? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we do have some interest in this room, and I think I'm only going to ask for formal adoption when CNML is actually approved.
Very nice.
To reduce the number of documents in the backlog, but I think we have some interest here. So let's go ahead with this.
Okay, and we'll go also ahead with the split of having just the basics in here, and then we do the wider filtering, query part on a separate document. I think that sounds very sensible.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, Christian. It's not working over.
Hello, my name is Christian. Hello, my name is Christian Amsus.
You have to speak about 1.5 millimeters from the microphone.
Okay. Hello, my name is Christian Amsus.
Millimeters.
I will be. What's your name? Christian. Come on. And I'll be presenting not only the main resource document, which is nearing completion, but also two documents that are closely related to it. The DNSSD document, which Caroline is primarily working on, and the personal draft that moves some things that we've been discussing in resource directory out of the main document. So as I said, the resource directory as it is from the author's point of view pretty much ready. So nothing more will come of it if we stay brooding over it. So we need your input so this can go into a working group last fall. We've done quite a bit of work in the last few years. It is mainly documented in the issue track and pull request. By the time we released the -13 draft, we were down to one remaining issue, which I'll talk about in just a moment. In the last days, another came up that is mainly editorial. Do we want to have this forward reference still in it or not? And I'm hoping for this number to go up a little bit while we are receiving reviews, but I expect that there will be mainly editorial things that we need to clear out through that time. The issue that I'm looking forward to solving is that we'd like to show the interoperability of the resource directory as we have specified it now
in that sense that different people arrive at compatible implementations from the same document. So far, I have 3 people that would like to work on this. Please, if you have an implementation of a resource directory, drop me a mail. And then if I know who else is participating, then we can set a date and we can set a context in which we will have this in detail. This will probably be a remote interrupt because we can. So what changed recently? This is basically the delta since IETF 100. There's been lots of smaller cleanup. So if you want to do this, then this is exactly how it is done because some other document is not completely clear about it. If you want to indicate your Dynamo server version, you can do that without changing anything of the mechanism. We're now allocating a multicast address, so the initial step of this finding a resource directory can be targeted towards a resource directory without exactly knowing what it is. The big change since -12 is related to what Carsten talked about before, the fine points between RFC 6690 resource link format and link headers. And for the sake of not creating confusion and having things just work, we resorted to, when looking for resources, to just returning absolute references, because this avoids a whole bunch of ambiguities as long as we're dealing with a link format representation. So when the resource directory mandates that link format is supported by the server, but all other kinds of serialization of web links can be used as well. And if they don't suffer from the same ambiguities, then in those cases, relative references, we don't forbid relative references, but for, where we know there's problems, we just hand out absolute references. And the last part of changes was related to resource directories that are not necessarily hosted on the same server. So, for example, if you have 2 resource directories and want to do lookups across them, we added some text in the resource directory document that says that do not expect this URI to be a relative reference. This can be just treated as an opaque URI. The resource directory will know what it is doing. And what exactly the resource directory could do is outlined in a new draft that is called resource directory replication, which just explores several possibilities of what you could do if you have multiple components in your resource directory because you want to scale to large numbers of requests or what's or not. This doesn't propose a specific way of doing it, but shows that it is possible within what is provided already by the resource directory. And this is also compatible with an earlier draft of Jaime that deals with more distributed resource directory. So those two are kind of orthogonal. Another document that is closely related to the resource directory is the export from resource directory to DNSSD. This document is still in active work. It has been updated to reflect all the changes in resource directory. It now has a proper introduction. So this is not nearing completion yet, but it is in a state where we can be relatively sure that we only reference to the resource directory and don't need to forward reference from the resource directory to RDDNSSD. Everything that DNSSD is supposed to do can happen as an extension to the resource directory as we have it now. And this is the way to go forward, we think, with this. And this is happening, but not ready for working group last call as of today. Speaking of working group last call, what is missing for the resource directory? Reviews, because the last ones we've received from Jim and another review were on -11. So in order to go for working group last call, I'd ask for some people to have another look at it. So any volunteers? I see at least 3.
Maybe some of the other SDOs, OCF, OMA could also volunteer since they use resource directory and there are members in the room of those SDOs.
When the members are in the room, the SDOs.
Well, and
volunteer.
I mean, Michael, obviously, but I wasn't talking about you though. I was mentioning possibly, yes.
Okay, so for the minutes, Matthias and Ivailo had their hands up first, and then Michael and Padu. And yeah, I think that's good for this round. We will have a working class call, but having a few reviews before that would be great.
And as I said, if you have an implementation, and this again also goes especially to SDOs, please contact me so that I can arrange for whatever we need to run this against each other and see whether we all arrive at the same practical implementation from the specification.
So the plan is to have a plug test around mid-April, depending on the availability of people, of course. So we have a month to get our implementations up to speed. And then the plug test itself will not be a physical meeting, but will be done over the internet.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, so we have two drafts here that are working group documents and one draft that is completely new. And the question is, who cares about this RD replication scenario that Christian brought up? So do we have the energy, do we have the interest in this working group to look at this? Is this something we should push to the research group?
Well, as I am interested because I also worked on that some years ago, but I wouldn't mind revisiting it.
But is it something where we think there will be a standards track document soon, or is it something that just is good to explore somehow? In the latter case, I would push it into the research group because that's where we do these things.
Research group sounds good to me because I don't plan on this to be the way how those things work, but I like this to document that it could work and to explore what we are running into when we're doing this. So probably I should just ask T2TRG if there's interest in picking this up there.
Yeah, so maybe you have to find the chairs and.
Stuart Cheshire from Apple. I think if we move to a world with many, many things in the home automated, we're going to not want a single point of failure. So this may not be urgent, but I think it is important. At some point, we'll want things like this.
So since you're there, do you have an opinion on how to distribute it? Is it DHTs or are we thinking something else?
It's too soon. I don't have any strong opinions for or against any solution. I do feel like we will want some kind of solution. We're not there yet. Most homes have a single Wi-Fi access point, and if it fails, it fails. So clearly we don't have a fault-tolerant system, but I think we will want something like that in the near future.
Thank you.
Are Keränen, without any hats, I think it's a very interesting topic. Would like to explore it. With the Think RG co-chair hat on, sounds very much kind of the explorative thing that we should supposed to be doing in the RG. So I'll be very much in favor of taking this here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're done with this point here. Marco, since we are ahead of schedule, we might be pulling the group communication to today. So just prepare for that. But the next item on the agenda is Kumai. And I have to dig out the slides for a moment. So start talking. And I will try to find the slides. And yes. And you can have a laser pointer, but you can't have slides at the moment.
Okay, I love the background here. I'm not sure if it's going to represent connected devices 20 years from now, all them talking co-op. Anyway, yeah. So, okay, hello everyone. My name is Alexander Pelov, and I'm going to present the advancements of the things that we've done with Kamai in the past months. So there have been several quite exciting things out there, and now the basic message that is the takeaway from you is that we really need your input now, and I'll be asking for all of reviews. So looking at all the people that are here, each of you can get a document to review, so that could be good. But I really am going to be asking for you for this. So what we done the last time and what we had, there are new releases, new versions of all the documents. So there are three main documents for Kamai. So we have the Yang to CBOR, the Kamai document, and the SID document. So these are all working group items, and the Yang to CBOR is from the point of view of the authors, it is ready. So we would like to make a working group last call on this one. Yes, so please do review this one. And
no, I'm sorry. I just got your slides, and
they are
like this, so I have a little bit.
I can talk on this also. You know, it's yeah.
Yeah. So you have slides now.
Okay. Now I can know what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so this is what I was saying about. So we have these three documents that are working group items, and they have new versions. So we did some minor changes there to the Yang to CBOR, and it is ready for working group last call. So basically the things that we did there is you have this thing that is called Yang template, and we just needed to make sure it is in RESTconf, and we just needed to make sure that it works out of the box with the encoding, with the Yang to CBOR encoding. And as of today, it works. So basically, I don't see anything that we could add to this document. So please do review it. Then we have the Kamai. So the CBOR is the encoding. The SID provides you how you encode identifiers, and the Kamai is the protocol itself. So here for the SID document that provides identifiers, the only thing that remains is for us, we need to see if all the things that we added, actually that we made sure for the Yang to CBOR, are actually also true for the SID document, and go again through Ayana about this. And I would like for us to make a working group last call after this. And on the Kamai draft, well, here we need to go over a couple of things to make sure that it works out of the box. The first thing is the Yang template. Then there is this new thing, or at least for me, it was relatively new, the Yang attach. We need to make sure that it works with NMDA. And for Yang push, so we talked during the weekend with Hank. So we found out that there is basically, it should work out of the box. So it's pretty much okay. So this is here, actually, it's pretty strong what we are seeing, right? So we did at core, we developed this protocol, Kamai, and we say, okay, we take the Yang world and we bring it here into the IoT world. And so the people in the Yang world, they continued building new stuff that is quite powerful. And we're just making sure that how it actually works without changing the thing that we did here. So I think that's a pretty powerful thing that we are seeing here. And yeah, so these are the three drafts here. And there is this new draft that it's not a new draft. It's in version 2, so it's stable since IETF 98, and it is the Kami introspection model. So basically, how do you learn from models that are already there? And so here, this is a question: do we want to do this in core? So I'm going to ask all these questions once again at the end of the presentation. I just wanted to give you a couple of pointers how you can start using Kamai today. So there are a couple of implementations from the last time they were existing in Go, in C, and there are some people that told us that they have their own implementations. We had a virtual interrupt at the last hackathon. So we tested it with fetch, and so we tested the fetch operator with IETF system, and it actually proved to be quite challenging to have such a big module for interrupt from the start. So that was a lesson learned. And on this hackathon, what we did, we scaled down a little bit on what we wanted to do. We wanted to start an open source implementation of Komai, so we are postponing this for the next time. But what we did do is we joined the semantic interoperability Wishy hackathon, where you have the things coming from the T2TRG, coming from the W3C, so you have this thing description. And what we showed was that you can do the mapping from Yang to the thing description, and you have the bindings from Komai to expressed in this thing description. A lesson learned from there, we need at least to have to save the get method, but mostly we need to save to keep the methods that we have get, post, put, delete, so that we are able to keep this compatibility with the thing description. So if you remember on the last IETF, we were saying, okay, we would like to simplify the document and remove everything except fetch and patch. Right now, this thing actually seems to point out that it's going to, we'll need, I mean, the whole ecosystem as a whole would take a little bit of time to be able to express everything in only fetch and patch. So it would seem a little bit too fast to go and say, well, we don't need get and put. So it's already there on the document. There is just an implication that we will not be able to simplify the document by just removing things. Yeah.
Matthias Kovac, speaking for W3C Web of Things. So in the TD, we try to allow for adaptation. So if you have an implementation that uses, let's say, weird methods, that we can allow for that. However, there was quite some pushback there that like the sensible defaults should be in place, that there is something that people can converge to, and something having a get for something that is linked to is kind of one of those. If you want to simplify and say, hey, this is a very constrained environment, we really have to cut it down to the minimum, you would have to deal with something that you cannot have properties that are something that where state is directly exposed, but you have to use actions all the time. Basically an action to read something, an action to write something, but that's what you're doing if you only have fetch.
Yes, so that's actually a very good first lesson that we have out of this, and it was, at some point we were super excited that okay, well, no, we can really super simplify the thing, have only fetch and patch, but from all this interoperability point of view and from semantic interoperability, it wouldn't be reasonable. So this actually says that okay, we did our work, right? Everything's there. We cannot really simplify it more than it is. So yes, and the last time we did an interrupt that was some kind of a private interrupt, like you over the internet and people are just setting up things. So it showed up that there are actually quite a lot of difficulties doing this. One of the difficulties that we were using IPv6 and UDP. So you tend to have some filtering from time to time with these things, and we had these issues. So from the last IETF, we saw some great people here that work at finterrupt, and so their logo is cropped here, but they will forgive us about this. So finterrupt, for those of you who have not heard this, is a platform. So it's an open platform that you can go and you can do your interoperability tests on that platform. So you have like an environment that is set up for you. It is open, like it's a European project, like so it's it's really used for this, and you have the way to coordinate the things, to sniff the traffic. That is so when you do your interrupt, you have a sniffer that is going to write down all the packets that are exchanged, and you can have even in some cases verdicts that will tell you okay that the interrupt passed or failed. So what we did is we actually published our implementation on this site. So it is called like a reference implementation, which is reference for the finterrupt. So this means that you can go there and you can set up your own interrupt session and you can run it, and it will run. And you can have a Komai server set up and a Komai client. So depending if you wish to test, if you have a Komai client, you can go there and test with a Komai server. If you have a Comai server, you can use the Comai client that's over there. And for the moment, the methods that are implemented are get, fetch, put, patch, IPatch, and delete. So we have not yet implemented the post. So just to walk you, to show you a couple of photos that it really works. So you go to this internet address, you sign up, and then you're good to go. And then when you sign up, the only thing that you need to, you say, okay, I want a new test. You need to click here on interoperability, and then you see the because here you have a list of tests, and you need just to click, okay, I want to do Comai test suite, and then you click next, and so forth. Then you have like you have a whole thing how, because there is a VPN, you can connect over VPN, and then you have IPv6 and that no filtering and so forth. So it's really user friendly, and like it's not us that we are running it, so you have a whole organization dealing with this. So really great, you can start using Comai today. The test file that we published, so we wanted to do something simplified, and IETF system is, if you want to make sense of things, it could take a little bit of time. So there is a very simple file that it basically has so it's a simple model with 3 leaves. So we have a container interface and 3 leaves, IP address, name, and throughput. Like it's almost invented. And then we have the SID file that is generated out of this. So you have, so this is the identifier that normally will have comma interrupt, blah, 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 blah. And this is the SID. So for the moment, we are using SIDs that are from the experimental range. And basically, if you want to run today your first Comai request, you go to finterop, you create your interrupt stuff, and then you do a co-op get to /c/rfy. And this does get a get on this SID file, so we are going to get the IP address of that thing. So it's as simple as that. So that was the first point. There's the implementation. You can start running it today. The second point is about the registry. So now the registry is, so this is the first draft of the registry, if you wish. It is not yet approved by IANA, but we have started already allocating IDs so that we can learn how to use them. So you can come here. So the URI is comai.space. Comai.space. So you go there. Fortunately, here it is cut, but you have a couple of URIs. So you can go and you can say, well, what are the models available? And so you can see all of them. So there are some of the systems ones are over here. So you can see the models, and you can click on the YANG file and the SID file. This is only about the SIDs, right? YANG is just for consulting. And you have tools. You can generate the SID file from here. You can generate the YANG file. So you can do all the not the YANG file, but you can generate the SID file and all that stuff. So it's all there. Just go there, and with this, I'm going to say, okay, well, we need reviews of YANG to CBOR, and I think the best way of this is just start a working group last call. Then we have core and the SID and the Comai drafts, and here we really need reviews. So we'll check these things, and by the end of March, by the end of March, that's for sure. Maybe I'm not sure by the end of the week, but by the end of March, and yeah, then we really do need reviews. I mean, we as authors have gone. So I'm reflecting what Christian said. We have done everything that we could do here, and we can spend lots of time just trying to say, okay, improve readability. But if we don't have any input, it's difficult for us to say, well, it's. So who is willing to review the YANG to CBOR? Hank.
Yeah, hi, this is Hank, listening half ear. I can make a explorational endeavor into NetConf and maybe select a specific individual there that helps me in concert do a review on that. But that is the only way I would commit to that. If I do not find a partner there, then I will not. But this I will try to. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That works pretty well for me.
Yeah, the whole situation is pretty complicated because we are doing something here that goes into a different ecosystem. And so the reason we haven't last called Yang Sibor yet, which is essentially done and has been stable for a while, is that there is a certain risk. The more we learn about using it in practice, the fewer mistakes there will be in there. But one view would be we can do this now. We have played with it for long enough, even though we don't have a specific event where we could say, oh, we just went through an interop and it was great. But it has been around for a while. People have played with it. And when we do the working group last call on this, this certainly will be in concert with NetMod, which is doing the Yang work. The other drafts are slightly more risky because Yang is right now going through their second system syndrome and has, actually it's not Yang, it's the netconf environment that was imprecise. Yang is not a problem, that's why we can last call the first one. They have this NIMDA thing, I forget what NIMDA means, but it essentially means let's redesign everything. And so all the documents that interact with the netconf Yang space need a few tweaks to make sure that they actually work in the NIMDA space as well. And right now, I personally, I'm not feeling very sure about the fact that we have done this, but I also don't have any indications that we don't have done this. So that's something where we again need input from the network management people. And the same thing is true for the Yang library. I think it's not yet entirely clear that we have to do this at all. But it may be a good idea to have our own way of getting this catalog information. So it would be really useful to have input from people who want to use Komai, whether we should be pursuing this or not. Yeah, so I think as a working group, we are in a somewhat difficult situation here, but on the other hand, this stuff has been stable for a while, apart from the NIMDA issue, and we should be finishing it. So yeah, you asked for reviewers for the Yang Sibor. Now, who would be reviewing the SID and Komai documents from this working group? Nobody. Nobody in this room. Do we have a conflict with some netmod thing or netconf thing? So everybody who would do this is not in the room. That sometimes happens.
That's actually a question. Is there a way to have a last working group last call in two working group and consulting and another working group?
Yeah. So
can
yeah. So there is no formal last call in several working groups, but by just informing them.
So how about we say, okay, there is a last call, and we say to NetMod also, and this should make people react, because then we can stop the last call in case.
Let's try this out with Yang Sibor. The reason why Yang Sibor really would benefit from an early last call is that there are people who want to use Yang as a data modeling language way outside of NetConf. Just use Yang as a data modeling language and use the Sibor representation. So this draft contains everything that is needed for that. So we can go ahead with those applications. Okay, so to me it seems we should be starting the last call on Yang Sibor now. Should wait a little bit for NIMDA verification of the Komai things. There's probably not that much that will happen with SID based on NIMDA, but I'm not a NIMDA expert. And then go for a last call next month.
Okay, thanks. And do the interop. It's really cool. They have a nice interface.
Yep. One comment not related with this one, but with the DNS, the resource directory DNSSD. Kerry Ling is pointing out in the Jabber that the DNSSD working group on Thursday that draft will be presented on that group on Thursday. For those interested.
Yeah, I said that at the beginning, but maybe Kerry wasn't.
It's a reminder because it's not in the minute. So
yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I think we are done with this item here, and that means we have about half an hour gained, or 25 minutes gained, and we can start doing working group items from tomorrow. And I think we should start with the GroupCom stuff, because that also was discussed in ACE today. Let me quickly find the slides for that. And as usual, you're allowed to start talking while I'm digging out the slides.
Okay.
You're really allowed to start talking.
Yeah. Slide really helped. Thanks anyway. Hello, Marco Tiroca, I6. This document got adopted right after Singapore. It was resubmitted with minor polishing, while this version 01 is an actual major update after that. Yes, most of the updates are actually out of two major reviews we got from ESCO and Peter after Singapore. Thank you very much for that, indeed. So based on that, on those reviews, we essentially restructured the document organization quite a lot and clarified as many things as possible. And here I just summarized the main ones we took care of. Already starting from the terminology, we noticed that there could be potential for confusion for the work group. So we provided the exact definition we intend to have for that. We refer to a security group as a set of endpoints sharing the same security context and essentially key material and policies and so on. So this doesn't have to be confused with other possible meanings like network group when it comes to possible IP addresses, identifying a multicast group, for instance, or even application group, meaning a set of nodes running the same application in the context of a security or network group. So here we mean only security group, and you can map that quite flexibly in other kinds of groups as well. In the security context, especially out of comments from Peter, I guess, we try to clarify as best as possible how the different types of contexts, so commons and the recipients, are established and derived later on. Derivations especially occurring at runtime. And of this request as well, we added a new table highlighting the exact deltas from the contexts we already have in the main OS core document and the content we are adding here in this one. In section 3 about the COSI object, that was an explicit request from ESCO. Also, we added examples on request and response messages before and after compression. We switched to counter signature 0 because we believe it's quite effective anyway, rather than counter signature. And we updated the external AD in order to mention explicitly the signature algorithm used in the group for counter signature. And we removed actually the group ID for external AD because it wasn't really necessary to have. Section 6 is a new one to have, definitely, because considerations on what the group manager is supposed to do in the different stages of the protocol were actually scattered all over the document. So we essentially collected all of them. Now they are listed all together in a single section where the last 2 or 3 are actually optional features that the group manager can have. So now they are all collected in a single spot. We had some work also on the appendices, actually, that they were a little bit restructured, rephrased and moved. Appendix A used to be a section with assumptions and security objectives, and it was quite distracting where it was, and it made also poorer the alignment with the main OS core document. So we thought just to move that as an appendix. We got some feedback. in those reviews about the use cases, so we just improved their description in Appendix B. Well, in Appendix C, where we already gave an example of how a group identifier that partially changed dynamically can be encoded, now it comes also with an actual examples, considering again the constructor we already had as prefix and epoch. Then Appendix D, this is also related to what we presented this morning in the ACE meeting. We consider also the alignment with the new draft ASK group com, because the appendix still provides a high-level description of the joint process that pointing at the ACE approach as the recommended way, and now we have enhanced that pointing at the new draft. Those are the main points addressed in the revision. Now there are a few points open to discussion for which further reviews and feedback are more than welcome. There's a point about the independence of the security group from IP addresses altogether. So far we have mostly talked in terms of a request message especially sent over a multicast co-op, so over a multicast IP address, but there are some cases where requests, especially selectively retransmitted, can or should be sent even unicast. Bottom line, the group identifier should be just enough to retrieve the correct security context one needs to process a request. Right now, instead, the draft says the context is retrieved considering the pair group ID and IP address of the group. So perhaps it's just better to force this decoupling altogether and use the group ID alone. And that's it. Another thing, we have kind of solved that with a few mail exchange with ESCO today too. We are currently stating that it's important that the GID is partial, at least in a part of it, random and large enough, especially to avoid global collisions with group identifiers of other groups under other group managers. We can potentially neglect, at least be less strict when considering randomness and large size of that part of the group ID. Please, Peter.
Hi, Peter van der Stok. A very obvious question. How do you see how do you want to get the relation between multicast address and GID then handled? You think about the resource directory, or do you want to do autonomous maintenance? How you call it? Management. No, okay. Do you want autonomous management of the multicast address with respect to the group ID?
One way can be through resource directory or group managers, then in case you need to coordinate with one another. Or bottom line, one can try possible different security contexts that can be both retrieved and try them until the right one is found out as a tiebreaker.
Okay. Do you want to remove it completely from this document? Any reference to the multicast address and say this is a different problem? Or that I'm not quite sure here.
It is essentially a separate problem. The point is being able to send a request over multicast IP, and that is still possible.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Fine.
I don't believe that this is necessarily restricted to multicast. It could be unicast trees. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot. Oh yes, this is about the terminology. So right now we have forced and stressed quite a lot the multicast word. So that's why the terminology multicaster, meaning an endpoint sending request over multicast IP, and that's it. But back to the comment before, perhaps we could just consider to adopt simply the same terminology we have in OSCORE, and that's it. And that would in turn simplify also the enrollment of new nodes in the group, because it just reduces the amount of roles they can have. And by the way, they're just the same again. So you would have positive side effects too, but it should be totally doable. And finally, more on the join process, actually. As I mentioned also before, the appendix covering the join process is still a high-level example, but it's structured at very high-level guideline, more discussion on about how to provisioning and handling public keys, and then pointing at the ACE-based approach we have in ACE as the recommended way. Should we keep this line of reasoning and keeping the way open for possible alternative approaches than the one in ACE, or we should just go for the ACE one as the one? The ACE one is aligned with the general guideline in the first part, of course, but just in case other approaches can come up later on. So far, we are allowing that in principle.
Carsten, I would like it if the interface that you are assuming here is well documented. That's good if you want to put another join process in there, but it's also good for verifying the ACE join process. So it's clearly defined what security properties you expect from that join process. So I think it is a good thing to keep a clear boundary there.
Okay. Yes, some update on the implementation. We already had last year in Prague a proof of concept in Contiki, of course, aligned with the now old version of the draft, not with the very last one. But I recently came to know about an implementation from Osram Innovation, developing C for the Link IT Smart board, and that's also essentially aligned with the very same version of the document considered by the Contiki implementation. So we were wondering that this is possibly good for taking first steps to an early interop, perhaps already Montreal. Can't promise that, but we can try. Yeah, we've already talked about that, but it's essentially a related activity in ACE describing how the join process is performed, key provisioning, including using the ACE framework and whatever profile of ACE you need to use to secure communication between the joining endpoint as the client and the group manager as the resource server. But you find more details in the ACE draft about that. That's all I have.
Thank you. So who has read the most recent version of this document? How long has it been out? Okay, so generally, who is interested in reviewing this document? So we have had a few people who reviewed it. Okay, so there are about 5 hands up now. Okay, thank you. So we still have time left, and we could just continue with the agenda, which would make Ari the next guy who's on the list. Yes, but it's less juggling if we just use the next item on the agenda. So we have a few surprises in store today.
Okay, so too many requests, response code for co-op. Have to check what is actually on the agenda. So the background on this is this pretty common case that a co-op client can be bombarding a server so hard that it actually becomes overloaded. And the question is like, how can the server tell, hey, you are doing this too fast, please back off? In HTTP, there is already defined an error code 429 called too many requests. So it seems quite sensible to also register this for co-op with the 4.29. And the co-op specific addition here would be I would use the max age option to indicate for the client when is it okay to try again. So that's roughly the gist of it. And this is originally part of the co-op PubSub broker. So it was decided in the last IETF meeting that since this kind of an error code seems have used much more wider scope than just co-op PubSub broker, it makes sense to do it as a separate RFC. And there's also a recent OCF interest for the same kind of functionality. There's one question that came up during the drafting of the details of this specification is that should there be a way for the server to say, well, don't do that, but here's a set of things that I might be considering okay for you to do. So what the current text says, that the client shouldn't send the same request before the max age option has passed. So, however, something may be useful here, but maybe again, this is something wider than just for this response code. Could be actually applicable for other response codes. So maybe this is something we want to consider, but keep actually outside of scope of this draft. Some generic method for some hypermedia controls in the payload, perhaps, or some header extension telling, hey, here's a set of okay actions. But that's the key part of it. And
can you go back to the previous slide? Carsten, again from the floor, this sounds like a really good place to remind people that they can actually send response bodies with error responses. And you could explicitly point out that the error response that comes back might give additional guidance. And then people can just register media types that provide that guidance, and we have a nice decoupling from the response code itself.
Yeah, exactly. However, maybe that's not something you want to specify in this draft, but has a generic mechanism. So I would recommend keeping that out of scope for this. However, would be very useful to progress this draft relatively fast because it's going to be now a normative dependency for the PubSub broker. And as I said, it's also interesting outside of the IETF for using this. So keeping it simple and being able to progress seems like a sensible way forward. However, there has been a discussion that, well, there's also some other response codes that we may want to be defining. And should this draft then be bundled with some of the other response codes? If they are something that we can progress fast and in a non-controversial manner, probably it makes sense. If it would be delaying publication of this draft, I would be a bit worried of that. But the key question, working group item, since it's a normative dependency and it was agreed on the last IETF that it was already part of a work group document, but we just split it apart. Having work group working on this seems to be a reasonable way forward.
Yeah, so it seems to me that we should just do the working group adoption call on the mailing list now. And then essentially when that time is over, do the working group last call.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Peter van der Stok. I also had a controversial response code, which has been presented already twice, I think. And I very much would like it to go forward in the same smooth way as is proposed for this response code. And I would say that bundling the two response codes to have the same smooth treatment would be very welcome indeed. Yeah.
I have a slide for you.
You have a slide for me?
Yes.
No.
But let's do this thing first. So anything else we need to discuss about that? So you have a little bit of feedback. You can do a -00 IETF -00 of the document after the working group adoption, and
sounds good.
Then we do the working group last call. And if Peter is fast enough to get his stuff in there before the working group last call, then he wins.
Oh, that's easy.
Okay, thank you. We have a plan.
Okay, we still have 6 minutes left, but that's probably not enough for Peter's item. Or do you want, since you already started? We may have to pick it up again tomorrow, but.
This comment goes between these two presentations, that there is a second response code that we defined in PubSub that is similar to this.
Which one is that?
It's basically analogous to the HTTP no content response, 204 in HTTP. We want to define a similar response code for CoAP.
Okay.
Okay, I'm pleased to oblige. What is the motivation for this draft? That the enrollment of secure transport uses the HTTP response 202, and which means it's not immediately available, but say come back in 10 minutes, 3 hours, and then you can get the response. And this response code can be returned both for a get or a post. So just doing an observe on a get is not sufficient, because you want also on the post to have this response code done. Well, we have no such response code for co-op, and nevertheless we need this. The HTTP 202. Any comments? No. The HTTP 202 has been done for memory here. I'm not going to read it aloud. I mean, it tells you, look here, it can be a request, it can be delayed, and eventually in the response it can be said where you can monitor your request. Well, we have 3 use cases for this kind of response codes. First of all, there is this EST co-op S. Then there is the draft co-op pub sub, which has a bit different treatment. It doesn't say you have to wait for the result, but actually it says there is no result. Yeah, so you go away and don't bother me. And then there's of course the too many requirements, which we have just about, which is also a new response code. So the proposal is one RFC, which we discusses these 3 response codes, and we go forward smoothly, and hope that it will be approved by the working group. I want to stop here.
Oh, you have one more slide.
Yeah, but I want to stop here.
Okay, good. So I could use the last 3 minutes to present my slide on this.
Yeah, we did this very well. Huh? Yeah.
Thank you. So basically, co-op is a lot like HTTP, except where it isn't. And we have tried to keep the co-op state machine simple. So for instance, we have decided not to do redirects, even though redirects are by many HTTP people considered to be a basic part of HTTP that everybody should always do. Co-op doesn't use them. And there are 2 reasons for this. One is redirects are really badly defined in HTTP, so it would be hard to do this right. But also we just want to keep the state machine simple. And the difference between error response codes and success response codes is that error response codes all create the same imprint in the state machine. There was an error, so the request is done, no caching, and so on. While a success response code actually requires every single client to have code to handle this success case. Now, one way to handle it, of course, is to say, I don't understand this, so I give up. But I think that's really counterproductive. So adding a success response code is an expensive operation because it kind of impacts the whole ecosystem. And now the question is, if there are application-specific state machines that happen to have something in HTTP that kind of seems to have handled that. I mean, the way EST has appropriated 202 is I'm not going to comment about that. But is that a reason for us to emulate that? Or should we just say that there is a REST approach to do these state machines? If an application needs a state machine, then you transfer representations with the important information to run the state machine. My feeling is just as with redirect, where we told OCF, oh, you can define a media type that has all the information that would be in a redirect. We could do this here and say, oh, we can define a media type that says the content is not yet available. Now, those applications that need to cope with this, of course, now have to implement that media type. So we haven't reduced the complexity to 0, but other clients that don't care about applications like this don't have to take an impact on their state machine. And I think this is, since we have about 40 seconds left, this is one thing that you might want to take home for the afternoon, and we can continue discussing tomorrow morning. But I'd really like to hear what the view of the working group on this is, do we want to open the floodgates here, or do we want to be as frugal as we have been in the past? With that, thank you for coming today. Tomorrow, 9:30, in another room. I hope everybody will find. Where are the blue sheets?
Where is the blue sheet? I'm gonna go sign it.